I think that what I wanted to add to it is just that, sorry, I'm gonna lower the hand. What I wanted to add to it is that a decision gets pitted as a contest of force in many cases of the majority vote. If you can get 51 out of 49 or something, or if you can get whatever you need, whatever threshold is needed to push the decision, whatever element of bargaining position is needed, like you can be a holdout or something, or you can have a veto power that you abuse, or there are so many dynamics in conventional governance where the decision and the outcome of the decision ultimately becomes reduced down to a contest of force, by which money is just one more instrument of force. People can use money to get an advantage on putting their thumb on the scale, getting the decision to go through the way they want to, regardless of any other stakeholders' expressed needs or whatever. It depends on what the decision is, case by case. But the thing about fractally is that it forces a decision to have unanimous consent at least. Like even in the experiment we just did, we did not get consensus, right? Consensus being an enthusiastic agreement from all participants. We ended up though achieving unanimous consent, where like there's a major difference between that. Think about it socially. When a group is bound to the outcome of a decision, you're stuck with this, right? You're deciding together. Let's say it's a family vehicle. The family is buying a family vehicle. You're going to be stuck with the family vehicle for at least the next 5 years, right? And dad wants a convertible, but mom wants a van. And it's dad's money, so we got a convertible. Contest of force, and the kids don't matter, right? They did not even achieve unanimous consent on something that might have been like maybe a sporty station wagon or something. Sorry, that's probably a really frivolous example I was using, but think about the dynamic of a group that's stuck with a decision that did not even achieve unanimous consent, where somebody in the group resents the outcome and is functionally disenfranchised from the group due to having the weaker hand in the contest of force. I mean, that is the toxin in group chemistry. That is the poison in any organization, in my opinion. And I think that decision making, having an advantage in the method of decision making, might be the single greatest advantage any organization can have. And so that's just what I wanted to add. Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
I want to add to that to reach a consent. I basically put out that if anyone had a paramount objection to that outcome of that vote, he should really make that heard and argue that, and give his rationale, because then it's important information for the group to know, and maybe others will even change their vote when they hear that information, and that might be important for the whole organization, if you want to take that example. So, but if not, that means that person is okay moving forward with that decision, and he does not think that it will endanger or jeopardize the general direction of the organization moving forward, at least not until the next voting period, which might be in a week or 2 weeks or a month or a year, right? So that's what it means to reach consent. It's like starting an experiment until the next cycle of reevaluation, which will be the next time we come together and vote. And so that's how we broke that tie by putting in these elements and adding that information, that context.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's very difficult sometimes to reach a full consensus, but as long as any misgivings are being heard by the group and taken into acknowledgement, and you can evaluate until the next period of voting, I think that's very important for governance as a whole. you don't always have to like a decision as long as it carries the same message behind everything. Like you want to achieve something with a group, you want that group to show that they've achieved it, and if what you've brought up isn't favorable, and the next time you do a vote, like you can show that like it didn't work, or however you want to put it, like it didn't achieve its full glory, it's something to take into account for the next vote as well.
Sounds good.
Share my screen and give some reasoning why the language of portals.
Yeah,
The reason
I like this
was
book.
trying to tie into alien worlds, and one of their first wormholes, I like the word portal better, was to Binance chain, and that brought a lot of success to the chain and liquidity. And I just thought, our first challenge here is to power up this portal. So the NFTs you received last week are my representation of a portal. I paid an artist to do it. I didn't have time to do it myself. My intent with these NFTs is to get more feedback, and I think the long wording of the mission and some of the just my first attempt at these NFTs, I think I'll have a new template for next week. So these are super limited edition. If you received one of these from last week, you were one of 12, and the borders represent how you ranked in the meeting last week. So 3 of you got the mythical, and then it went down from there to legendary, rare, epic, rare, and uncommon. The cool thing about this is that Extra's team behind them did a lot of work to make us the 3rd in their site to ever back an NFT with different tokens other than Wax and EOS. So these all are backed with Trillium and KROWN, and it's a sliding scale as well. Your top mythical received a total of 210 Trillium and 210,000 KROWN, and then went in a Fibonacci sequencing down from that. So the second level got 130,000, then 80 Trillium and 80,000 KROWN, 50 Trillium, 50,000 KROWN, and so on. You can burn this NFT and recover the tokens that are behind it. But my intent is to have these so that we blend them, and the blending is leading to an NFT backed with silver. So we'll see what the exact numbers are out, but I'm really trying to gamify it so that if you have the same rarity of legendary with the red border, say if you had 5 of those, you'd blend up and you'd get a rare, a mythical NFT backed by an ounce of silver. So we were talking about, value, and I think this, once again, just like we're leading the path in governance here, I just liked the fact that we can be leaders in backing these tokens as well. The one that you blend to, this little picture is actually an animation, so it gets prettier, but yeah, I just wanted to really give Extra team a shout out, because I wouldn't have been able to back these on my own or had the skills to do it. So, thanks to please give your utmost thanks to Steve. I know he worked late last night to make these available, and I'll be getting out the next ones, and I will be asking for more input. The mission on this one is the long one. I just took the consensus from the group when there was a consensus on the first one, but I kind of really like making sure that we stick with, alien worlds and get more of a consensus from the group. I really like Coman's idea as well, that when we have enough of a group that are interested, that we could put forward different designs on the NFTs. But I really think the bigger consensus to grow this group as well is something that KROWN brought up in our group. And I've been thinking about from the first day of Alien Worlds is to build an open source available tool to assist us to reward miners and give them NFTs live. I had Max down in Costa Rica here, and we did a whole 2 days of videos of me being in different places and all goofy doing the weather so that I could put it forward that, hey, I'm on a live video right now. And if you're mining on Magar, 1111, right now you get a free reward and have something live and more interactive. And I initiated a project with Jordan that attended the first meeting here. And we have the first MVP of just the start of that kind of tool. But bringing that forward to a group like this that's focused on governance, maybe it'll be our next meetings, or maybe we can discuss in the Go Fractally kind of Mighty Network site is how we'd bring that to light, because I know that Jordan's a team member, but he needs to get paid for his work. I could rally the troops behind our group called Kinder Miners and would definitely support that initiative. And maybe just putting that thought out there of who wants to be the early adopters to support this tool could bring people over here, and this could be the fractally tool. Some other thoughts as well is that, people that don't have a land, if we started this group where we had more governance and if we had enough people, maybe a second round, if we went a second round of consensus, maybe that group would have be on a MSIG to control the assets. I know it's a lot to discuss when we have MSIGs and assets. But one of the things we could do, and I've seen other groups do, is have one piece of land that we advertise for other people to mine on, and the profits from that land could go back into this group. So there's, some logistics there, because these assets or tools cost money. But I would definitely be willing to put my assets and my money towards the group, because if I don't, it's up to us as a group. If I don't put my own assets into this, we're not really contributing and putting a layer on top to try and build what we want to. So my assets would be better shared with a group that has a common interest than not doing and not being active. So I could put some thoughts, but I'm really glad, KROWN, you were thinking the same thing, that to continue that interactions. And then past that, there's a lot of ideas that I've thought about of how we could have, Tecoco's made a really nice platform where it's open for us to build other tools and think of other concepts to build on top of this. And that's what's going to really make this world succeed. If we had a big enough group and a little bit of will and some developers, we could propose, if we had enough influence, enough people, that we'd want our whole new world. We could, connect unused assets in their worlds. There's 6 different planets that at one point had a map of where the lands were and where the water is around them, but there's unused little pieces of those worlds in water that aren't being accessed or access. But
really,
yeah, just a lot of thoughts there.
It's really funny that you're mentioning about the water tiles, because we actually had a conversation fairly recently about those, in the fact that they're not being used, and a whole bunch of ideas were thrown out of the woodwork from that. But there's no plans, as far as Alien Worlds goes, to ever sell those to people, but there's nothing stopping us using them as like home bases for communities. Maybe you make a quote unquote rig in the sea that people can come and visit. Really interesting that people have thought about those as well, because it's been something that's never talked about by us, and certainly you don't see it talked about in the community very often. But once in a blue moon, someone comes up with this idea, like, the water's unused, what could we do with it? And it's fascinating to know everyone's ideas around that.
Well, what I'll do is I'll reach out to Jordan and see if he can join us on next meeting, or at least be active in the Mighty Networks, and give us an idea of where he's at and if he's still on board with finishing that first open source tool. And I just see that as a nice bridge for us to get some exposure for more Alien Worlds players and bring them over. Yeah, I think it'd be a good start. And then I'll put up a couple more polls on what our mission. We're just this, I'm calling this season 1. I'm not sure how long season 1 goes, if it's a quarter of a year or so many weeks. But you know, this is our first attempts at all this, so missions can change. I use the word mission too as kind of a parallel that in Alien Worlds, they do have another planet called Binance World, where you go on missions and you send spaceships, and it's all really nice game language just to mean that you're getting a rate of return for staking some tokens. But yeah, there's some nice crossovers that we could do to activate more of the community, and then, you know, bring these whole ideas and engage people in governance.
The beautiful thing about the mission structure is eventually governance will be tied into it. So governors could propose certain missions. Say, like, you have a specific community, we could say, well, the KROWN community wants to propose the creation of a set of missions, maybe to go off and find some far-flung undiscovered worlds, maybe to create funding in some way for various projects. There's a lot that could be done with the mission structure that is unrealized and untapped currently.
Yeah, that leads me into a bigger idea of the fractally software. They're coming out with their own blockchain. We had a nice demo, and I'll post it in the Mighty Networks network, of Dan and his group using their new UI. So the biggest thing, another opportunity, would be to see an integration layer of bringing other groups from other chains. I noticed that some of these DAOs, just to be part of a decision-making group, they're using the assets in their wallet. They're saying, hey, I either have this many tokens, or I have this membership NFT. Or say if this group branched out or expanded and we started having different groups, and one group was the marketing group and they had a little marketing NFT, or maybe it's different community groups. Maybe Coneyman has his group and David Harris has his, you know, Alien Army group, and maybe that would pop up. Maybe they'd have consensus in their own groups because they'd have that membership NFT. So there's a lot exciting happening that we don't know about with Fractally, but I know that them not being a competitor to the other chains as a governance layer is really going to take off if we can utilize what those groups already are using, right? They're proud of their collections. They're proud that they're a member, and they're proud that they have some tokens that get them something besides just, you know, a hodler and maybe some profit at the end of the day. So there's apps right now that you can only belong to a Discord or a Telegram channel if you have a certain NFT. Well, we should be thinking about the same thing. And I'm not a developer, but I know that just that would be a nice, you know, I don't think it's on their game plan to start with, or their roadmap, but that would be something that would make that application really more accessible to more groups and more, you know, more metaverses, more games, right? So.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I'd love for more layers of integration, because it just, each layer that you add, it's like an onion, you know, you get that extra bit of complexity on top, but at the same time, it provides more security So you can stop those 51% attacks, which are basically just attacks where the majority can rule by natural having like the biggest wallets or the biggest voice. The more you add, the more it stops those 51% attacks. So it's a really interesting structure that we could add more on over time. And then obviously we've got more gamification ways coming out this year that I think are going to open up more doors than people realize, because we're going to have Minecraft integration. So once we get people playing an actual existing game that some of us may have already played and we know and love, and then you cross that with the blockchain as well, like you can have a lot of fun and very interesting things happening.
Yeah, this approach of onion that give more security and also at the same time that abstract the complexity, because at the center of the onion is like the OS, and more you go into the circles, layers around, you have abstraction. And at the end, for the users, it's very easy to use, very easy to onboard. And for us, the developer also, we don't remember at the end how was made the operating system. We just use on top layers that abstract the complexity and also make the possibility to do collaboration, extend the collaboration with other ecosystems. For example, the one of Extra Fun Nothouse with L2 Liberty Coin. That could be is a platform, and this platform could be linked with our platform, backed by protocols. So we are connecting platforms between them, and by doing so, we do collaborative ecosystems. And in our ecosystem itself, we do collaboration between circles. That's very powerful. And also, I think we should circulate more wax, circulate more EOS, circulate more between us the token. And to do so, we should encourage the people to fund initiatives. Is not to be seen like to be someone that just inject money to say, I have inject money, now I am the new super guy or the new Superman. That's nothing to do with that. You inject money because you take responsibility, you take ownership, you want to collaborate between yours. And if each of us, we inject the EOS that we have from Pomelo, from Eden, from the ecosystem, that has not to be seen like something wrong. That's good. That's very good. So this next election, for example, of Saturday, if the chief delegates that will be elected, the new board member, have in mind to fund Eden Fractal, and by funding Eden Fractal, that's the entry point to do communication, marketing for the other fractals like this one. That doesn't mean that that Fractally cannot have his own marketing arm. But what does it mean, marketing? Because we don't have to wait that all is perfect to do marketing. We have to do marketing iteratively, and not only marketing, development, also tooling. It's like a pyramid, marketing, tooling, infra, and all that in parallel, so iteratively, and not be frozen in the stone. That could change maybe in some weeks. The mission of Alien Fractal is another mission, or let's say a complement of the original one of this mission that I think it's very open. It's very open, this mission. Just brainstorming a little bit, but the onion is a good approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I applied for a Alien Worlds grant. I don't think we'll find out for a couple of weeks if it was accepted. It was for backing these rewards for participants for this governance. But like anything, building reputation when you're asking for funding, if we can grow our group and be consistent that this is adding value, there's other grants there as well, right? So, you know, maybe it's a match funding where we have people that say for the tool to interact with alien worlds to have more interactions there, you know, we can match that funding. KROWN obviously gives worker proposals. It's more of a, you know, token for support rather than really a lot of monetary value. But you know, the uplift, I participate in their governance. So if there's seed value, I think that's one thing we can do, is just, you know, showing that, you know, we need ambassadors and leaders to lead this process, and that we're up for the challenge, and that, yeah, some of these extra tools that we need built, you know, the funding is there, right? And yeah, everyone here has been consistent in their efforts to the community. Everyone you know, and showing this on tape and putting ourselves out there is a lot, right? So I think that's going to build a lot of confidence as well, that that, yeah, we're willing to, you know, talk about it, but also put our name and face behind it.
Being an example of this, because you never know how it's going to go. We enter this meeting and we press record and we're like, yeah, I agree, it's recording, but I don't know what's going to happen over the next hour. Exactly. I might make a fool of myself or something. I might reveal sensitive information. Who knows, right? So we're doing a good job of it so far, and being present for the process, we're ironing out the wrinkles a little bit. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about a book I read called Navigating the Noosphere, which is on the topic of being a professional in the space of open source technologies and how to earn a living, and how to make sure you're paid for your time. Even when you develop things in the open source methodology where, I mean, the obvious monetization paths aren't there. I feel as though in our space, with a thing like Trillium token and Wax token and EOS and everything, people's eyes just go green. Like, you're telling me I can change the world and I don't even have to spend any real money? And I'll just release this ICO and I'll be like a millionaire tomorrow. No problem, right? You know, like that is there. You know, that's there for people. It's somewhere in the back of their mind, it's somewhere in the pit of their stomach or something. You know, this prospect of, you're telling me like I'll play this video game for the rest of my life and that's the only work I have to do? Not quite. You know, like within the mission structure, there's a lot of opportunities, but navigating the noosphere is about sales. It's about sales. It's about like being the service maintenance calling professional to maintain somebody's Linux system. And you're a developer, and that's the kind of like what you do. But there could be more to it than that. There could be more to it than that. There are tons of organizations who stand to earn a lot of cost savings in their way of communicating, in their way of record keeping and decision making, and I don't know, they can spin off from here. But you know, I noticed Extra had something to say too. I hope I didn't change the topic away from what you wanted to add, Extra, but that's all I wanted to add there.
No, it's quite all right. I just wanted to dovetail with what Dwayne was talking about, you know, about the grant, because similarly, like we did a grant as well, you know, from Alien Worlds. You know, obviously we got one from KROWN, which we're working on getting that trading pair and the market making bot up and running, you know. But you know, Steve got distracted to help Dwayne last night, you know. But I mean, for us, you know, just kind of like broadening out to kind of what Patrick was saying about, you know, the platform to platform, was the reason we asked for the grant was not because we want the Trillium necessarily, was more just because it was kind of, you know, in our conversations with Max and so forth, was it was the easiest way to kind of get into a conversation with Alien Worlds at a high level about, you know, them being basically another collection on NFT backers, right? So just like Dwayne did it with, you know, the NFT that he did today being backed, then, and basically having specific schemas that generate the templates that are backed. We can do that essentially with Alien Worlds itself, right? And so individual, we haven't really worked out the details, but like individual landowners could work it as like another rewards, kind of like Miner, or just kind of figure out like how can you kind of broaden that platform. So that was kind of like the test that we did. Just kind of like explore if that's a reality or not. And it seemed like the grant process was kind of the easiest way to go about that. But anyway, so maybe Coneman has a comment on that.
I do actually, because funding's been on my mind lately for this software solution that I was proposing. So I spoke to a Wax developer who was going on about smart contracts and ways to run the system. And just for the basic UI development and the smart contracts together would run about $5,000 US, which honestly is a fair amount of money, but that pales in comparison to the long-term running costs over its lifetime. Because, obviously you'd have to pay for some server hardware or have it running on your home system, electricity costs. You've got all of the integration potentials and issues. Anyone who works on it would ideally be paid a fair wage for their time, retrospectively for what they're doing. So funding lately has been... Sorry, Patrick, you're coming through. Okay, well, it seems to have stopped now. So yeah, funding's been a massive thing on my mind lately, and obviously getting the grant from Alien Worlds is a good solution, even if the initial Trillium outlay isn't enough to complete your entire project. It does then open up the doors to have a discussion with Dakoko about further support down the road, especially if it's in their interest and helps further any software solutions that they're creating on their own volition as well. And then I was looking at maybe bringing a couple of other people on board for funding and have it be a collaborative project that could push forward and become this big thing that communities could run eventually. Maybe there's some sort of membership that could be created, so for continual use of it they pay a very small fee, and all of those small fees together would equal the operating costs over its lifetime. It's just things that I've been toying with in the back of my mind.
Yeah, we were talking about that too, about how exactly to monetize that, because I mean we built NFT Backer as kind of a solution to our own needs, right? Initially was that LD2 wanted to do our own LD2 fungible token backed NFTs, right? The silver backed ones that we did last week and that we're doing again in 2 weeks in a public sale. And so it was really kind of just an extrapolation of that work that we wanted to do anyway. And so basically, even though technically NFT Backer is a separate company, it was all funded by LD2, just to kind of get us that solution. And then it was conversations with Dwayne and some other, NFT creators and so forth that were like, well, if, we'd like to do that. So how exactly do you create that kind of, to your point, that kind of UX UI on top of the smart contracts that are already having that functionality, right? So like in Dwayne's example, we, basically like pre-approve everybody who wants to do a collection on it. And then in that pre-approval process, it's basically, what tokens do you want to have the option to back your NFTs by? So obviously for Dwayne, it was very easy to say, okay, KROWN and Trillium, were the things that he wanted, with the same functionality of LD2 as well, which is kind of the underlying, asset that we pretty much offer to everybody. Because really that's kind of the point, right? Is kind of not only from a philosophical point of view, but just kind of a collection by collection, kind of approach. So you know, to your point about funding, it wasn't really, the funding really wasn't the point in a way. And yeah, you know, and you're right, the grant wouldn't have covered like what our development cost would have been to do it. But you know, finding that kind of like dual or multiple like functionality, you know, with the same thing that we need internally was, like I said, kind of the justification for us to kind of just do it. And I'm sure there's going to be other collections. We're already in conversations with a couple other different collection creators and other, you know, play their own games about doing the same thing for them. So we see it as kind of like a more just kind of building out the product, building out the platform than it is. And then, you know, again, to your point, doing like maybe a subscription model, right? So how many templates do you want to have? How often do you want to be, you know, minting new ones? And kind of what assets do you want to have backing it up? Might be some different tiers in terms of having some sort of like wax-based, like I said, subscription to maintain that. Because your point is well taken about, you know, maintaining the infrastructure and so forth. So covering those costs, and then the NFT backer really being kind of a sales channel for LD2, because you have to buy the LD2 tokens to do the LD2 backing. And so if we can cover the kind of basic costs with some small subscription, to your point, to your, you know, comment, then we can also be motivating people to buy more from us, which is ultimately where the lion's share of the revenue for the company is going to come from.
Yeah. And then in the spirit of Alien Worlds building portals and bridges to different chains, I think the tools that we build will fractal out to these other communities, whether it's the Uplift or the Binance community and their assets. And we use this as a hub. And I will put forward right now that the investment that I put into that open source tool to do drops, starting with on Wax, on Alien Worlds mining, bridging to the Uplift, bridging to Binance, using Extra's tool to do extra gamification of backing, that I would put forward to this fractally group, because there's one key thing that would need if it's in a collective, is a group of people that have a multi-sig for the smart contract. Maybe a second tier would be a group deciding, you know, what new functionalities, right? Then the larger group giving us a signal and feedback of what they'd use it for. And then another group of, you know, where do the proceeds go? Do they go back to the users? Is this really a DAC of communities using this tool, or does it fund this fractally process? So further to that, just a public statement, the work that I put into developing this portal on the Mighty Network site, the collection and the account owned currently by myself, fractal.moon, and those assets are going to be part of the groups. I'm just spearheading it. So none of that is mine. The funds that I put in personally have been sent with a memo as a gift. And then the funds that I've put, or the grant that I put forward, would come to this group. And I'm just spearheading it, and by no means want to be the long-term manager of this. If we don't grow and people are willing to you know, step up and help out, you know, maybe just, you know, fade away. And I'm just hoping that we build enough community that takes you know, takes ownership of this and participates. And my initial thought when I started funding the tool was for our Kinder Miners group, for us to, you know, gain some political clout in the metaverse, but I was the only one that funded it and was going to give that to that group. And this is where I'd like to bring everybody, because I think it's a worthwhile mission to organize these different tools, figure out the security issues of multi-sigs and all the rest of it. So yeah, I'd like to, I'll start spearheading that next activity of that next tool that would bring the most value to bridge these metaverses, bridge what you've done, Extra, all the work you've done, KROWN, and yeah, let's have some success, and just remind each other too, if this isn't fun for us, it's not going to be fun for others. So how do we have the fun part of it? You know, it's tokenomics and gamification and bridging communities. But, you know, I really liked when we were in Dan's talk about what Go Fractally group would you start next? And he's like, how about a joke group? How about a bunch of people tell the funniest jokes, and at the end of it, they rate themselves on the best jokes, and then people can share those jokes and things like that. So without a level of fun and a game inside this, just going and collecting some more tokens, great. If you earned it and showed up, fine. But, you know, how do we bring that element of fun into it as well?
One thing that I'd like to bring up is a bit of an anecdote of something that I tried a little while ago, and I still have this as a deal going active, was with EOS USA. They funded an account for me, so I have free access to their system. And Dakoko also funded it in part as well. And the whole point of it was an open drop system. So I made an account called KROWN Land Drop, which is still active to this day, that anyone who wants to can drop an NFT in. And I got a coalition of about 100 landowners, each between them. I think there was about 300 plus lands involved in that. And anyone who wanted to could get an NFT dropped on, quote unquote, a competitor's land, for example. So I knew that one of the guys who had his lands in is also running for governance. I dropped some governance NFTs of Cone Man on his lands as a gamification thing, and he did the same on my land, and we did it as an experiment to see what would happen. But it was this great thing where the competition bred people to want to put more NFTs in, and we gave out, I think, about 100,000 NFTs during its lifetime, which wasn't very long. I mean, it was only active about a month and a half, 2 months. And in that time, we gave out a huge amount of NFTs, from game NFTs. Some of us funded and put in Alien World NFTs. There was like people who had never made an NFT before in their life were suddenly making an NFT and putting it into this drop process. And we all sent it out it came with an automatic memo that told them where this came from. And you could visit the website and see whose lands were available on it. But it was a really interesting system where it created this sort of frenemy, collaborative competition system. It was a lot of fun, and it's just something that you could do with a drop system that adds that extra layer of gamification on.
Mm-hmm. You can do a murder mystery game where the group has to be one detective. The group has to act as one mind and arrive at consensus for how they're doing their, you know how murder mystery games work?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that games that people play together tend to be the most fun games. Frenemies is a really fun term. I mean, a group of friends that gathers for poker, maybe as a routine. They gamble with each other and they compete with each other, and they joust a little bit in a friendly way. That's a lot of fun. And so governance has a fun aspect in a way. I think that you could break the ice and really get somewhere with people with that as a starting point. Like, here's this process. I did it for fun on the weekend because I bought tickets to a murder mystery game, right? Like, people buy tickets for their recreation, right? But I could bring this to work. And here's a fun fact. People love the idea of being a social media professional because it doesn't feel like work. Because they've got their brain programmed like Pavlov's dog, that when they log into social media, it's fun time. Pick your favorite social platform, Twitch or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or something. It's like, you're telling me that I could spend all day at work doing this and this is productivity, but it doesn't feel like work. It feels like fun, because the first time I did it, I set my brain. I sort of established a cognitive associative effect. to logging in, to the act of logging in the first place. I know this is going to be fun. That's
Yeah,
what strategy thing.
It was a fantastic tool for marketing for people for free as well. The interesting thing is I had other people with their own collections on Wax who had never had anything to do with Alien Worlds before, were suddenly putting their NFTs in because they knew it would go out to people and get their NFTs out there. I had a couple of game projects put their own NFTs in, so their NFTs were dropping on Alien Worlds lands, and they were getting like some free promotion out of it. But also the people who were mining, they were getting value from their mining because they might get an NFT and they might get something of use for another game, which branches them out into more of Wax space and more communities. It was really a good example of how powerful a simple NFT drop tool could be for the greater, wider community as well.
I think that referring to NFTs as tools is the most important thing, really, because the NFTs get the same criticism from a million different angles, which is get over yourself. It's just a JPEG or some equivalent, some reductionist equivalent to that, like that a digital artifact can't possibly be valuable, can't possibly be that valuable. But it's a tool, you know, and it's as much a piece of art as any painting is or any other collector's item is. You know, if you look into the world of collector's item, you got to paint with a broad brush. If you think that NFT collections are just a fad, I think that you're calling the market for collectors historically irrelevant. I mean, look at the long history of it. But what's different about it is that it's also a tool, right? An NFT as a technical utility, you know, I think it really escapes a lot of people. They have not been explained. It has not been explained to them correctly yet. It hasn't clicked for them, right? There's some prerequisite understanding that they need, maybe, in order for it to click, in order for them to be able to understand it.
Yeah, it's a massive thing. Honestly, one of my biggest challenges whenever I talk to anyone outside of the blockchain about what I do for work, and I mention anything to do with NFTs, their face just drops because they just know from the media that NFTs are scams and they're no good for the planet and they don't do anything. But the way that I try and explain to people is it's any piece of digital media, whether it be a picture, a movie, piece of music that lives on a network that you can verify ownership of. That's it at its most simplest form. And then anything that people do with that on top is what makes the bread and butter out of it. So whether it be that I use it for a game and my various NFTs are pieces of armor and weapons for my character, or I want to be an independent artist and use a new technology platform to proliferate that, it's what those people make out of it. That's where the unfortunate nature of scamming comes from. But NFTs at their heart, they're not malicious. It's what people do with it. It's a very difficult thing to try and instill into people. But yeah, they're absolutely a tool in the right hands, and in the wrong hands, they're something that can put a lot of people off, which is the unfortunate side of things. But I think the same could be said about just about anything in human existence when greed comes into it. Yeah, it's just the way in the party is. But it's one of those things that I think people are starting to become a little more accepting of because they've seen fundraising and community tools, governance tools is going to be the next big thing when it comes to NFTs, I believe. And hopefully we can push that paradigm in a different direction than NFTs equals scam.
Well, obviously we will, right? We're all staying on it, and eventually the next generation gets it, and then they explain it to their parents. So just stick with it long enough, on long enough timeline, everyone will understand.
Maybe it's better not to have everybody understand.
Sorry?
And maybe it's better to not have everybody understand. So it doesn't have to be understood by everybody. That's part of the fun.
That's a big part of the fun. That's a big part of the opportunity too, is that the lack of market adoption that we can point to is the opportunity.
One thing that happened with NFTs this year, which I found really heartwarming, was we found out that one of my friend's little girls had cancer. She was only 5. And her family didn't have a lot of money at all. And there's suddenly this was dropped on their lap and they didn't know what to do. In 24 hours, we'd raised just over $6,500 for them, just via NFTs alone. And then another donor also put some money in to match that. And we just put it into their hands. But that was in 24 hours. They went from this massive thing of uncertainty and then also having to deal with the fact that their child has cancer to the fact that we're going to be able to eat. We're going to be able to travel. We're going to be able to make this Christmas the best one that she's ever had, just in case she never has a next one. You know, touch wood that doesn't happen. And everything on top of that. And it was an amazing thing where people just came together. They didn't really care about the NFT. They cared about the message behind it that it produced. And fortunately now, with chemotherapy and everything, she's on the mend and it's looking really good for her. But it was a massive breath of relief for their family. So it wouldn't have been possible, I don't believe, with just like your standard GoFundMes, because everyone makes a GoFundMe and they kind of like get pushed to the wayside unless you get a little bit of market traction, i.e. on Twitter or something along that lines. But in this space, it became possible.
It's so true. You know, when you make a donation to something you believe in, you often get a thank you card or a receipt or something for your donation. And the difference with that, like an NFT makes a really good receipt. It makes a really good thank you card, but it also is a bit of a return gift because you've given somebody a memento that they can choose to keep for themselves or that they could sell. And that with other types of donations, that's not possible. I mean, there's always a limited, there's only so much reach that a person can achieve when they're in need, right? So let's say you've got a worthy cause and that you're looking for donors for the worthy cause. You'll be successful to reach a few thousand people, you know, however many you need to. And then among them, somebody might make the donation. But there's a whole world full of people and a very long future of people who might also think, you know what, I would have if I'd known. I would have made that donation if I had known. I want that memento. I want to be the one who made that donation. And I'll buy the NFT. So like you bought the NFT because that was the donation, but I want to buy it from you. That's different. That's actually a different thing.
Yeah. So this NFT had no utility to it other than helping someone in the real world. But I've always toyed with the idea of taking those NFTs, any NFTs that we use for fundraising, and doing something with it in the future as like a big surprise to those people who donated, not telling them beforehand, this is going to be something someday. Just one day it is something. Hey, guess what? You donated to this a long time ago. And now you can do something with that NFT, like some sort of game, leader point system, whatever you want to say to it, and just surprising them with that. and seeing where it goes. I think it could be a really interesting experiment as well.
That's different too. That's really different too, because you can give return gifts, surprise return gifts that way. Like, it's not, you have a way to return a marker with an address, even if it's completely anonymous. You still have that. I think that's very creative, and I'm glad that you're not over promising with it, but it's very creative. Utility wise.
Yeah, I've got a couple of other fundraising things in mind along that same line, and it's probably something that if I was elected into some sort of governance-ship, that I would try and enact with planetary funds, just simply because fundraising for me has always been a big part of my life. Like, I was involved in a lot of charity fundraising when I was younger. I worked with some of the biggest charities on the planet, like the NSPCC and Protection for Cats Leagues and Red Cross as well. So a lot of the big names, and I worked as a charity fundraiser campaign manager is what they called me. And I'd always like to see where something more organic would go with fundraising, because the thing is about charity fundraising, especially back then, there's a lot of cold calling, and most people don't even want to pick up their phone to that. And if you do pick up your phone and you start hearing their spiel, most people are inclined to say, I'm not interested, or I'm busy, or something along that lines. You present them with something that's a bit more tangible, even if it's a digital asset. It's something that they can have in their wallet, a memento of, they know that it's done some good. We can do like some verifiable actions on chain maybe, and like push that to the chain and say, this is what your donation achieved. And then you start getting that word of mouth going out as well. Yeah, it's just something that I'd love to toy with more, because fundraising is important. Not everyone has the funds or the means to live.
Yeah, even the most socialist places in the world have a few places in their safety nets, elaborate as they are. People still need charitable supports, and obviously the places that have the least amount of social coverage have the most amount of extreme poverty.
I'm also a big animal lover, and animals can't speak for themselves. It's all through human proxy. So fundraising, when it comes to animals, it's very hard to get a lot of people interested in that if they're not an animal lover themselves. But if you do like some sort of game where the NFTs can be used in, or I mean, that's just off the top of my head, but like, you might get more people interested in it as a whole and helping out more than they realize. Maybe you don't even expressly tell them at first like how much it would help, and then later you drop it on their lap. Oh, by the way, you bought this NFT like however many months ago or moons ago. This is what your NFT managed to fund. This is what it did. Would you like to know more?
And you know what? I think that is inspiring, because it's obviously a huge aspect of the space already has been. Having experience in your professional world, bringing it in there, I think that a lot of people get interested in cryptocurrencies in the first place for some reason that comes from their ethical values, and it's just to be expected that some contingent of people interested in cryptocurrencies and NFTs and all of the space also are bringing their charity experience, right? Their not-for-profit experience to it. There's so much support for it. It's a big part. So it's a big part of where community starts. It's a big part of where grassroots efforts begin. It's like essential experience in a way of how to assemble a group dynamic, to fundraise it, and to deliver, to make a meaningful impact.
So I guess expect to see some NFTs from me at some point soonish along that sort of vein, because we've got a situation at the minute where some funds might need to be raised for a friend's family pet that unfortunately has cancer at the minute and needs an operation, and operational costs on dogs is really quite expensive. I think most places in the world, but especially in places like America and the UK, it's not something that most people can just pull out of their ass because it's a lot of money. Especially as we're going into like uncertain times with crypto, with financial institutions around the world, recessions, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's big inflation happening in a lot of these countries as well, but there's still enough funding going around that I think it could do some real good. But yeah, I'm love to trial some runs on it and then see where we can take those NFT receipts in the future and provide some extra value back to the people who first donated, and maybe use it as a platform to get even more donations. Like, hey, this is what these people did last time. Let's help spread the word, donate more, and maybe you get something down the line, but nothing's expressly promised that you get something. The likelihood is that they would. It's just, yeah. It's never something.
I mean, that'll be really cool. I think I'd like to offer one idea if you haven't already thought of this one. For in the way of like fundraising for qualified needs for I mean, it could be just creative one-off, like meeting the need of a person, case by case. Something comes up in their life, right? Like there's that type. But the example I wanted to share was of a not-for-profit called the Calgary Foundation, where what they do is they receive donations and they issue tax receipts. And then they pool the donations to an investment portfolio. And they also operate direct businesses. And that the profits of the businesses and the return on investment for the managed fund become the donations. And so they have like a churning effect to their donations at the beginning. And what they have not done is they have not gone the direction of being a donor directed fund. It's a bit of a dangerous sort of edge to the space, is a not-for-profit that is a donor directed fund, but it's out there, right? It kind of became its own runaway train when corporations and corporate governance got involved in their own charities. We can get into that if you want, if you're interested in this topic, but the thought that I have is to make a DAO that is like the Calgary Foundation. And so the DAO would operate direct businesses or operate a direct business of some sort, maybe like an auction house or something. It doesn't matter what. And it would also receive donations generically, and it would manage those donations in a managed fund and distribute the returns on investment from them in like a pre-configured way. So that might be a lot to put out there kind of late in the meeting, but I wanted to put it out there anyway. What do you guys think? Anybody have thoughts on that?
That's extremely interesting as a prospect. I don't know how that would look, but at least I know that the blockchain would be behind it. So you could always provide integrity of where those funds are being managed and what's happening with them. that's one of the main issues that we always had in the charity fundraising sector. We always had people coming back to us, well, what did my last donation do? I can't tell you that. What I could tell them is I'm going to work in dollars because it's easier and most people understand it. For every dollar that you gave to the charitable entity, by the time that all the operational costs were eaten up, only a couple of cents actually went to the charitable cause. The rest of it all went on admin for marketing. If they had a building, as many do, the operational costs of that building and paying certain staff members, there might have been a couple of board members, and even in non-for-profit, they still need to run and live. So this was all worked into the cost that, yeah, like literally if you donated $10, about a single dollar of your donation went to the charitable cause and the rest was all eaten up.
Now, I know about this way too well because my own Rotary Club hates me for holding us to the 94% standard. Rotary International delivers 94 cents on the dollar on average to its purposes, and that all Rotary members pay club dues. Like, we pay to volunteer. It costs me $240 a year to be a Rotarian so that I can donate my time. So in my club, I try to pull the average up. I want my club to be like 96% efficient on our overhead. But yeah, we know.
Yeah.
It's so true.
And then when people wanted any sort of proof of where their donation went, the only thing I could do was direct them to various charitable websites and their statistics. But the thing is, their statistics were always a couple of months behind in lieu. A lot of them were wildly out of date or overestimated. The averages were all messed up. The actual true accounting of it, no one could ever tell you unless you went to one of the board members of one of these charities and like, can you give me a full breakdown? And they're not going to do that just because it covers their own ass by not telling you. So
yeah, it's thorny. It's a big competitive advantage to have permanent transparency for that. So the Calgary Foundation at this point, they've been around for about 30 years or so. And at this point, they're managing a fund with more than $1 billion in assets, Canadian. So the returns on investment for that are really substantial. Like periodically, even though, because they've accumulated to that momentum stage, and that for all of the donations that they've received, they've probably distributed more donations than they've received in total. That's the reason why I'm interested in that approach to charitable giving, is that it's an engine, potentially. It's
it
an
does
engine
open up
costs of more marketing, right? Or
yeah,
content, or
it opens up that extra can of worms when it comes to not only accountability, but you've got the legality side of it, and then the whole taxation side of it, and there's a whole another ballpark there that honestly is like a full conversation in and of itself. But as an individual entity wanting to institute this and achieve it, it's a minefield for, say, myself personally, because what regulations and laws am I going to have to be adhering to in order to stay compliant within my state or my country or whatever, and then also provide the value that I want to provide via doing this. So it's a big undertaking, I think, but you can start small and work your way up, and then as you add in more to the package, you find out more from your government of what you're doing and how to stay compliant and legal. It's a big thing now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It sure is, especially like where
Oh, you went on mute there.
with getting proofs of personhood. Am I muted?
Nope, you're good. You're good. You just cut out for a second.
Okay. Oh shit. I'm gonna be out of time like any minute, guys.
No problem, no problem. I'm sure Extra, you might have a couple of words on the whole legality of fundraising in general, because you've been through it recently, if I'm not wrong.
Fundraising in what sense? Like we're talking about like charitable donations and so forth, or more, you know, like equity funding and so forth?
In general, I know you've been through some legality challenges yourself of late, and I wondered if you could enlighten us a little bit of how that process was for you.
Well, I mean, if you're referring to like, you know, the legality problems that my dad found himself in, I mean, those have been over for, you know, 5 years now. But I mean, that took 10 years for him to get through, you know, and so, and that was obviously like based on a very old paradigm of, you know, money and so forth. So I think a lot of that has changed, you know, in general. So yeah, I don't know how necessarily how relevant that is, you know, at the moment.
I'm gonna post. It's a big discussion around the fractally group and what it means to have assets. And I see that they are, you know, Dan Larimer seemed to be always more a thinker and maybe not as an astute businessman, and always got into business partnerships. And we've seen how those haven't worked. And then also his experience in DACs and what is a DAC, and, you know, can you really fork and take your property with you? So I'll just try and find the article that was talking about if you are part of a group and there was no agreement between us, and it gets put into the normal law by, you know, you basically agreeing to a general partnership versus a non-profit association. And it's going to be really smart for us to kind of follow his leads when we start. Well, thankfully in Fractally, the core group, they're going to protect us there with their token and how that works. But now we're coming in from an asset-based, you know, NFTs and tokens interacting with that. So how do we, you know, deal with that? And we all thought that this new legislation of forming an LLC, just adopting some DAO language, was going to do it, but it's still, it still doesn't really address a lot of the issues we want to get out of, is getting out of that old legal system, and how do we protect ourselves. So yeah, I think there's going to be, you know, as this space is maturing, we have more, you know, people that have had that experience of how to protect, you know, us and our groups and our multi-sigs and everything else. So I'll find that right away and post it, because there's some good information. And take it that, you know, he's not a lawyer, this is his ideas, so it's, you know, needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. But the new development there was this whole non-profit association. I'll bring it up in a sec.
It seems like it would make more sense in a certain way to do like what you would see in somewhat of like a hedge fund or so forth, which was like a limited partner, general partner kind of structure, right? Of, you know, the limited partners are entering into an agreement with essentially the corporation that's being, or the LLC is you know, another analogy of, and having that be kind of like a member managed or a manager managed, you know, LLC structure, where the DAO can basically represent, you know, all the LLC, all the limited partners, in a way of dictating to the general partner what exactly they can do, right? In terms of, this is the like investment criteria, or, you know, the, you know, distribution criteria and so forth, right? And, between that, there's also some operators agreement, right, across the general partners about how things happen and so forth. I mean, that would seem like a much better way, or a much more established way of, maybe is a better way of putting it, of a way of making sure that your assets are, protected as that limited partner, especially if you make your general partner your manager managed LLC. I lost my train of thought at the moment. That you have very clear like legal realities of who owns what and when can it be sold and how can you get out and those sort of things, right? I mean, those structures kind of already exist, like I said, in the hedge fund world and certainly the alternative investment world. So why couldn't you basically adapt that structure, right? And now, that's what I was going to say. And especially if you make your, if you require your general partner to be a fiduciary, right? So they're legally bound to have to do what's in your best interest, and not what's in their own best interest. And those sort of things add more legal constraints on what their ability to do things are. It seems like that would be the most analogous kind of like I said, established investment structure to what a DAO would want to do. And that means that the DAO isn't necessarily making all the day-to-day decisions or operational decisions, because the general partners are. But the DAO is setting the strategy and setting the, like I said, investment criteria in this example, and so forth, right? And everybody is transparent there, because there is no opaqueness across all those DAO members, right? And so you can still get to the same goal of what the DAO's intent is, without necessarily having the DAO dealing with all the individual logistics, let's call it.
Yeah, I think matching those two together, like I appreciate the strategy and wording that the governance tokens created on this new blockchain are more of an opinion and trying to get out of the whole securities debate. And I like that, yeah, then that DAO structured rightly could have these agreements to do real world things with, our other so-called DAOs that have assets. And yeah, it's more about that. There's more than one organization. You might have your DAO that can be forked, kind of in the example that I just posted, and then it's partnerships with these other entities like you're talking about extra. So yeah, that'll be something for us to discuss, and also a big discussion when bring it back to alien worlds is down the line, say, a year from now, there's been all these elections and we've proven ourselves that we're in charge of a planet. More and more funds are born into, our treasury. How are we going to protect ourselves in that group? You know what I mean? We have Dakoko making sure that they're protected. Then we could have this DAO, but how do we, get other things? So it's going to be a topic that's going to be, we're going to have to go through this, sooner than later, as far as the right structure. And maybe part of the, we might see 6 different legal structures be born, out of, people taking over planets and how they protect themselves. I know it's been a discussion too around the Eden a group that's making decisions about what is their liabilities and standing, and should they have their own entity. And then even further up in the EOS, all the way up to the ENF, to see how they've structured themselves as far as nonprofits and different things. So very, very interesting that we have a lot of leaders with a lot more assets and and more at stake for liability than we do that we can kind of follow. And yeah, I appreciate the bringing the real world back into it extra, because I know we've talked before that there are even tools, like if you look at the Shintai platform, that we can utilize something that if we definitely know that we are dealing with assets and securities, we could use third-party tools that manage securities and have that onboarding for the real world, and not to forget about we got to be realistic in all this. We can have the protection in this fractal governance method, thankfully with Dan and his team leading the charge, but those are going to be attached to things that more likely than not are, when they're assets and we're looking at maybe making a return, that they are securities. So it's going to be interesting how we mature in this space over the next year. Let's think about this in a year from now, where we've come with governance, and then where we've come with it really hitting the real world as far as how we're structuring ourselves legally. I've got a hard stop in about 15 minutes, just a heads up here.
Yeah, the big lessons learned from Dan's blog is that when you do something new, the legal system does everything it can to paint it as something it's comfortable with. And so then it'll apply its own rules and assumptions, which may not be the intent of what you're trying to do. And even if everybody knows it, they'll say, well, we're going to apply this in a framework that is familiar to us, even if it does exactly the wrong thing. So we're going to hold people liable because you didn't explicitly say so. So the first rule is explicitly write out what's done and the intent of everything, so they can't do that. The second thing is, okay, now you have to look at it from a legal point of view to say, how do you keep the legal system from trying to go its own way?
I did post a demo in the chat of ESIO/WAX multi-signature system that I managed to figure out how to work. And I think mine's one of the few guides out there on the internet of how to actually use it. But it's certainly something that could be used in a DAO situation, combined with like a website and a piece of software that helps manage that. And I've been thinking since our last meeting, talking about multi-sig and how some people in that multi-signature might drop off the radar, for whatever reason, and not put their input in, and you always need enough people, then maybe you could have activity weighting. So as long as they're active a certain amount of the time, they're on the multi-sig and they can make proposals and enact changes. Whereas if you start dropping off that, the multi-sig just completely ignores you until the next time you become starting to get active again, and you build up your weighting as such. I don't know if that would be applicable to anyone, but it's certainly there for you to take a look. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the same, and thinking, with a big enough group, say a couple of months down the road, we have assets, and we're giving out assets weekly. Maybe it's to participants of this meeting, or a subgroup that's dropping things onto worlds, and the governance process of first round, like we currently do, of who's the highest. The responsibility of that next person is to go into the next round if there's enough people, and then the final 6 people there are on that multi-sig for the next week and in charge of the community's assets. They've gained enough trust from the community that's their job. I like for the longer term, I like the weighted, and then also bringing in NFTs of what does it take to do that? You know what I mean? Like, so, having a multi-sig NFT that you're a holder would get you into a certain group to make decisions. But furthermore, maybe there's something like fractally that you have to go to so many meetings to be active. If you weren't active in so many multi-sigs and are holding your key, you're just automatically kicked off, and then there's another meeting through this fractally process or some governance process to, you know, elect another person. But yeah, all good thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, Dwayne, I think that to that point, right, the engagement becomes somewhat of the problem, right? You know, and you know, incentivizing people to do so, right? So you know, the access token, as you were describing just now, as I would call it, you know, that allows you to get into a certain group to vote, right? Is there some sort of other mechanism that could be added to that, right? Whether it be blending into a different NFT, or is there like an expiring essentially token, right? That self burns.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not doing it or something, right? So that you're not just sitting on that. Because I mean, even just in the example of, and I don't mean to be negative, but I mean just in the example of doing like the KROWN grant, you know, for the trading pair, right? I mean, that took quite a bit of effort on your end, you know, just to get, you know, that group, and whether it was the group or the technical or a combination of the two, right? If you're not being dynamic, let's put it that way, right, and addressing those votes or that multi-sig immediately, then you're kind of like you're losing the benefit to a degree, right? Because you're just waiting for one person or two people, right? And you know, it just may not be a priority for them or whatever the case might be. But then, you know, the outcome is the same, right? Is that you're not moving forward with that proposal, or in this example, right? Or whatever it might be. I mean, like, so just like real quick anecdotally, I mean, for us, like we have the multi-sig structure, like on issuing new tokens, right? So that like we have to have all three signatures, us, the auditor, and the depositor, all, you know, independently put in how many ounces that there are in the vault for us to mint the tokens. But you know, obviously those other entities are incentivized by us paying them, right? Or the token holder is essentially paying them to do that so that we can issue more tokens, right? So that's a very clear like business motivation for all of those groups to do that. But outside of that kind of business motivation, when it comes down to kind of a volunteer structure, that's where it kind of falls apart. So that's what I mean earlier about like incentives, right? So not necessarily like paying them to do it, but maybe paying them. I mean, maybe that is the best motivation, right? The same way that when we want to have our auditor in our vault, you know, do their multi-sig entries into our smart contract, we pay them, right? So I mean, that's just it may just be that simple and that complex. But then I think to your point a second ago, you get into, you know, the politics of it and the manipulation of it, right? Of, can I just pay more to get all these people to do the multi-sig because I'm a whale and it doesn't mean anything to me anyway? And then you're kind of gaming the system, and you may not be getting the same objectivity, if you will, or critical thinking. You know, you're losing those because now you're essentially just buying, you know, the votes. So that you know, that's a whole nother can of worms that you get down. So there has to be some sort of balance there, right? And maybe it is some sort of anonymity where you don't know who the people are that are voting, or it's a random drawing out of people that are in the pool of voters, but nobody except the people that are voting know they're voting on that particular, or they're entering their signature in that particular smart contract, so that you can't necessarily manipulate them, but they still get rewarded for participating with some incentive-based program, you know, program, you know. So I don't know, just some thoughts off the top of my head. And Dwayne, I have a hard stop too in like about 5 minutes. So.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to call it here myself, but I think it's been a really productive meeting, and you've given me a lot to think about, which I hope I can bring to the table in the next meeting.
Same here. That sounded to me like much more of an answer than a question, and it felt like our conversation had accumulated to that point where we're getting into trade-off analysis, one structure versus another, and what we see as being viable, most viable right in front. But I would add that volunteers have, the word has two meanings. One is somebody does work without expectation of reward. The other is that you voluntarily choose to pursue the reward. And so I would note that when people choose the former, and that they're a volunteer who's, I'm making my gift without expectation of reward, you know, no strings attached, just a gift kind of thing for something I believe in. It also means that I don't have a boss, that nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm not living up to anybody's instruction here. It's just a gift. Take it as it is, you know, take it or leave it whole as is. And that is appealing. It's something to keep in mind, that one of the reasons why people choose to give like without expectation of return is for the power that it eschews. Right? There's power that comes in the form of having autonomy for that reason, having to answer to no one, and the reflection on character, right? The reflection on character. It might be ego driven, but that's there. You know, it can be a tough one to get a hold on, right? If everyone in the group is starting it, like we're starting this together, we're all volunteer contributors, it can be hard to keep the glue. The thing about having a professional is you give them a contract, and then you give them the consideration for the contract by paying them, and then you can really evaluate them and you can hold them, they have something to be accountable for. I think that's just rephrasing exactly what Extra said, but it makes an important sort of legal and contract difference in that you voluntarily sign a contract for employment. That's a use of the word volunteer, but it's different than the type of volunteer that you know, the other type.
Well, then your point about accountability is well taken, Jason. It's like, well, okay, so you say to somebody, okay, you're part of this group that's going to sign off on this in this multi-sig structure, right? And the person doesn't do it. You know, how much of a stick do you have to use on them, right? You know, there's a carrot and a stick, right? And then, you know, so I mean, the stick in an employment is I'm gonna fire you, or I'm not gonna pay you, or whatever it is, right? I mean, and that becomes far more problematic, right, in a volunteer structure, because then the volunteers goes, well, you know what, like, screw it, I'm out. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? Like, I was gonna do, you know, something I thought was good and put in my time or whatever, but now that you're making me accountable, I don't want to be accountable, right? If I was going to be accountable, I'd have a job, you know, or, you know, so that's what I'm saying. The stick becomes much more difficult, where the carrot becomes a little more less problematic, let's put it that way. You know, my old boss when I was in the bank told me, he's like, I can't make you work. He's like, if you don't want to work, or you don't want to come to work and do the job, he's like, I can't make you work. He's like, but there are going to be repercussions if you don't. So, you know, and that was kind of his way. That was kind of his framework of how to get people to do what you want, right?
Yeah, and you know that pertains in the world of volunteers, traditional volunteers, like Save the Rainforest volunteers, right? And that, of course, there's a ripple effect to everyone's behavior, and what they do leads to the next thing. It's just that when you show up with no strings attached, it goes both directions. It's like, yeah, I'm giving my gift, no strings attached, but that also means not attached to me. And that I'm just going to do what I do, you know, take it as is, take it or leave it. And sorry, there was another sort of distinct point about that I wanted to make. Sorry, it's gone. Maybe it'll come back, but it was different. All
right, well, maybe we leave it at that for this week.
Maybe, yeah, I'll have to let it marinate a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good.
Wanted to say before everyone left, and it's just a very quick thing, is that the reward doesn't always have to be monetary, in the sense that when you're a group of people using the same systems and you want to see those systems get better, quite often the incentive is there to provide your time and improve those, because you know you're going to be using them too. So it not only helps out the space in general, but you're helping out yourself and providing your own reward from that.
Yeah, I think satisfaction and fulfillment is another big motivator, right? You know, not just necessarily monetary. To your point, Coleman, is, you know, that in of itself is a big driver or a big incentive for people to volunteer or really to do anything, right? So.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to leave it there for today, guys. I think it's been a wonderful meeting, and really thank you again for all your insights and your experiences and everything you're doing in the world of governance and blockchain space in general. Happy with how things went today in our breakout rooms, and really looking forward to next week and seeing where everyone's gone from today to there.
Yeah, well said, Coleman. I appreciate everybody.
Good. Thanks, man, for putting this together.
Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Dwayne. Yeah, thanks, everybody. Talk to you guys soon.
You take care. See you next week.
You betcha. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Goodbye.